The pen felt heavier than it should have. I stood there in the quiet office at Crestline Savings and Trust, staring at the document Mrs. Delaney had just slid across her desk. My hands weren't shaking yet, but I could feel them wanting to. Outside the glass walls, tellers counted money. Customers filled out deposit slips. Life moved forward like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Mrs. Delaney cleared her throat softly. She'd worked at this branch for 20 years. I'd known her since her son was in high school. We'd shared recipes, laughed about the weather. And now she sat across from me with pity in her eyes. "Mrs. Whitford," she said again, gentler this time. "Your son came in this morning. He had paperwork. Forms with your signature on them." I didn't blink. "What kind of forms?" She hesitated. That pause told me more than her words ever could. "He tried to close your account. The main one. All of it." The air left the room. Not in a dramatic way. Not like in the movies. It just left. Quietly. The same way trust leaves when someone you love decides you're worth less than money. Did he succeed? My voice came out steady. I surprised myself. "No." Mrs. Delaney shook her head quickly. "We noticed inconsistencies. The signature didn't match our records perfectly. And frankly, Mrs. Whitford, you've been banking here for 30 years. We know you. You don't make sudden moves like that." I nodded slowly. My throat felt tight, but I wasn't going to cry. Not here. Not yet. "Thank you for calling me," I said. She leaned forward, folding her hands on the desk. "I've seen this before. Not often, but I've seen it. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry it's happening to you." I looked down at the paper again. It was a simple form. Authorization to transfer funds. My name typed neatly at the top. And at the bottom, a signature that looked almost like mine. Almost. But it wasn't. My own son had forged my name. If you've ever trusted someone completely, only to discover they were plotting against you the whole time, you'll understand what I felt in that moment. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was something colder. Emptier. Like watching a photograph fade in the sun until the faces disappear. "Mrs. Whitford?" Mrs. Delaney's voice pulled me back. "What would you like to do?" I looked up at her. Then at the pen she'd placed beside the paper. "Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story." I thought about Martin. My firstborn. The boy I'd rocked to sleep when he had nightmares. The man who'd worn an expensive suit to his father's funeral and complained about the cost of the flowers. I thought about Harold. How he used to say, "Eleanor, some people will smile at you while they pick your pocket." I thought about the life I'd built. The years I'd saved. The trust I'd given so freely. And then I thought about what happens when you stop being a victim and start being a strategist. Mrs. Delaney was waiting. The pen was waiting. The whole world seemed to be holding its breath. So I picked up the pen. And I asked her a question that would change everything. "Mrs. Delaney," I said quietly, "how quickly can we move every cent I have into a place he'll never be able to touch?" But before I tell you what happened next in that bank office, you need to understand how I got there. Because betrayal doesn't start with forged signatures. It starts years earlier, in quiet moments you don't recognize as warnings until it's too late. My name is Eleanor Whitford, and I'm 76 years old. I was born in Burlingdale, Ohio, back when people still left their front doors unlocked and knew their neighbors' children by name. It wasn't paradise. Just a small town where life moved at a gentler pace. Harold and I met at a church social when I was 19. He worked at the Anderson factory, making parts for machinery I never fully understood. But I understood him. He was steady, reliable, the kind of man who showed up when he said he would and meant what he promised. We married young. Had Martin 2 years later, then Sylvie 3 years after that. Harold worked double shifts sometimes, and I took in sewing to help with the bills. We weren't rich. We were something better. We were secure. Harold had this thing he'd say every Sunday morning while reading the paper. Eleanor, you don't need much in this life. But you need security. You need to know you'll be okay when the world gets hard.
He was right about that.
About most things, actually. We saved every extra dollar. Skipped vacation some years. Drove the same car for 15 years until the engine finally gave up. By the time I turned 50, we'd paid off the house. That little two-bedroom with the crooked porch and the maple tree out front became ours.
Fully ours.
Harold opened our first real savings account at Crestline Bank in 1989. I remember because it was the same year Martin graduated high school. Harold shook the manager's hand and said, "This is for our future. For when we're old and need taking care of." The tellers there got to know us. We'd come in together on the first of every month. Harold would make the deposits while I filled out the slips. Sometimes I'd bring cookies at Christmas. Mrs. Patterson, who worked the front desk back then, loved my snickerdoodles. Those were the good years. The ones you don't appreciate fully until they're gone. Harold passed away 15 years ago. Heart attack. Quick and quiet, just like he lived. One morning he kissed my forehead, went to check the mail, and never came back inside. The money he'd saved became my lifeline. I was careful with it. Invested some in certificates like the bank suggested. Kept the rest in savings. Lived off Harold's pension and Social Security. I didn't need much. Never did. Martin and Sylvie came for the funeral. Martin wore a suit that probably cost more than our first car. Sylvie wore a simple black dress and cried into my shoulder. After everyone left and the casseroles stopped coming, Martin stayed an extra day. We sat in the kitchen, the same kitchen where Harold used to drink his coffee every morning. "Mom," Martin said, stirring sugar into his tea. "We need to talk about Dad's finances." "Your father took care of everything," I told him. "There's a will. Everything's divided fairly between you and your sister." "I'm not talking about the will." He leaned forward. "I'm talking about your accounts.
You're alone now.
Managing money at your age can be complicated." I smiled at him. "My son. My firstborn. I've been managing money since before you were born, sweetheart." His jaw tightened slightly. "Just a flicker. That's different. This is a larger sum. I work in finance. I can help you invest it properly. Make it grow." "It's growing fine where it is." "Mom." His voice shifted. Firmer. "You're being stubborn. You don't understand markets. Interest rates. Tax implications. Let me handle this." I set down my coffee cup slowly, looked him straight in the eye. "I understand what I need to understand. And right now, I understand I'm fine." He left the next morning without saying goodbye. That should have been my first real warning. But mothers make excuses. We tell ourselves our children are just stressed, just worried,
Just trying to help.
We lie to ourselves because the truth is too painful to hold. I didn't know it then, but that conversation in my kitchen was the beginning of the end. The moment Martin stopped seeing me as his mother and started seeing me as something else entirely. Martin was always different from Sylvie, even as children. Sylvie would spend hours in the backyard, making mud pies and talking to the birds. Martin would count his Halloween candy and hide the good pieces where she couldn't find them. When they played board games, Sylvie laughed whether she won or lost. Martin flipped the board if he was losing. I used to think it was just personality. Some kids are competitive. Some are laid back. But looking back now, I see it differently. Martin didn't just want to win. He needed everyone else to lose. He was smart, I'll give him that. Top of his class in high school. Got a scholarship to Ohio State. Majored in business. Came back for holidays wearing nicer clothes each time, talking about deals and portfolios and people who didn't understand opportunity. Harold was proud but cautious. "That boy's got ambition," he'd say. "Let's just hope it doesn't eat him alive." I'd laugh it off.
He's young.
He'll settle down. But Martin never settled. He climbed. And every time he climbed higher, he looked down at the rest of us with something that wasn't quite affection anymore. Sylvie, on the other hand, became a third-grade teacher. She married a kind man named Robert who managed a hardware store. They had 2 daughters, lived in a modest house in Indiana, drove a minivan, brought the girls to visit every few months. Martin called her lifestyle settling for mediocrity. I called it contentment. After Harold died and the will was read, both kids received their inheritance. Fair and square. Sylvie cried and thanked me, said she'd put it toward the girls' college funds. Martin barely acknowledged it, just signed the papers and asked when the check would clear. Over the next few years, I saw less and less of him. He'd call maybe twice a year. Always brief, always distracted, and always he'd work the conversation around to my finances. Mom, have you thought about moving your money into a higher yield account? Mom, I'm setting up a trust. You should consider joining it. Mom, I need you to sign this form. It's routine, just updating your beneficiaries. I never signed anything without reading it first. Every single word. That frustrated him more than anything. One Christmas, he didn't even come home. Said he was closing a deal in California. Sent a card with a generic message and no signature. Sylvie came with her whole family. We baked cookies, watched old movies. Her daughters sat on my lap and asked me to tell them stories about their grandpa. If you've ever watched one child choose love while the other chooses profit, you know the ache that settles in a mother's chest. It doesn't go away. You just learn to live around it. But I still made excuses for Martin. Still told myself he was busy, successful, that he'd come around eventually. Then came the visit that changed everything. It was a Wednesday in early March. The kind of gray, drizzly day where the cold seeps into your bones and won't let go. I was in the kitchen making soup when I heard the knock. I wasn't expecting anyone. Sylvie had called the day before. The mailman had already come. When I opened the door, Martin stood there in a charcoal suit and Italian leather shoes. His hair was slicked back. His smile was practiced. Mom, he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Surprise. My heart did a little leap. Despite everything, despite the distance and the coldness, he was still my son. And some part of me still hoped. Martin, I hugged him. He patted my back stiffly. You should have called. I would have made something special. This isn't a social call. He walked into the living room, eyes scanning the space like he was appraising it. I was in the area for work. Thought I'd stop by. I followed him in, wiping my hands on my apron. Well, sit down at least. Can I get you coffee? Tea? I'm fine. He sat on the edge of the couch, not relaxing into it. Actually, I can't stay long. But I want to talk to you about something important. There it was. That word. Important. I sat across from him in Harold's old recliner. What is it? He leaned forward, clasping his hands together. The gesture looked rehearsed. Mom, I've been managing a new investment group. We specialize in helping people your age consolidate their assets, get better returns, protect against inflation. I nodded slowly. I see. Your current setup is outdated. You're losing money, just letting it sit there. I can move things around for you. Optimize everything. I just need your signature on a few forms. What kind of forms? He waved his hand dismissively. Standard stuff. Authorization to transfer funds between accounts. Update your beneficiary information. Routine paperwork. Can I see them? His smile faltered. Just barely. I don't have them with me. I can email them to you. I don't use email much, Martin. You know that. Then I'll mail them. His tone sharpened slightly. But Mom, time is important here. These opportunities don't last forever. I looked at my son. Really looked at him. His eyes were Harold's eyes. Same deep brown. Same thick lashes. But there was something behind them that Harold never had. Something calculating. I'll think about it, I said. Think about it? He laughed, but there was no warmth in it. Mom, I'm trying to help you. Don't you trust me? That question hung in the air between us. Heavy. Loaded. I trust my instincts, I said quietly. And they're telling me to wait.
His face changed then.
The mask slipped. Just for a second. But I saw it. The flash of anger. The cold assessment. The look you give a stranger who is wasting your time. He stood up abruptly.
Fine.
When you're ready to be smart about this, let me know. He walked to the door. Paused with his hand on the knob. You know, Sylvie doesn't ask questions, he said without turning around. She just trusts family. Then he left. The door clicked shut. The house felt colder than before. I sat there in Harold's chair, listening to the rain tap against the windows. Something had shifted. Something I couldn't name yet, but could feel deep in my chest. That night, I barely slept. And when the phone rang 7 days later, I wasn't surprised. I was terrified. Mrs. Delaney's voice on the phone was careful. Too careful. The way people sound when they're about to deliver bad news and don't want you to panic. Mrs. Whitford, this is Sandra Delaney from Crestline Bank. Do you have a moment? I was watering my African violets. The ones Harold had given me for our 40th anniversary. Of course, dear. Is everything all right? That's what I'm calling to confirm.
She paused.
Your son came into the branch this morning. My hand stopped mid-pour. Water spilled over the pot onto the windowsill. He did. Yes, ma'am. He had documentation requesting to close your main savings account. He said you'd authorized the transfer. The kitchen tilted slightly. I gripped the counter. Close my account?
Yes.
The primary savings account ending in 7743. He had paperwork with your signature authorizing him to withdraw all funds and close the account entirely. My voice came out smaller than I intended. Did he succeed?
No.
Her answer was firm.
Quick.
I personally reviewed the documentation. The signature didn't match our records. And frankly, Mrs. Whitford, you've been banking with us for over 30 years. You always come in personally for major transactions. It raised red flags. I sat down heavily in the kitchen chair. The same chair where I'd sat with Martin just a week ago. Where he'd smiled and called it routine paperwork. Mrs. Whitford, are you still there?
Yes.
I'm here. I took a breath. Thank you. Thank you for calling. I'm so sorry. Her voice softened. Unfortunately, we see this sometimes. Adult children thinking they're entitled to their parents' money. But I've never seen it from you and your son, and I'm just very sorry. Share the story if you've ever ignored your gut feeling about someone you loved. Sometimes our instincts know what our hearts refuse to see. My own son had forged my signature, walked into my bank, looked the tellers in the eye, and tried to steal everything Harold and I had built over 50 years of marriage. Everything we'd saved and sacrificed for. Mrs. Whitford, would you like to come in? We should probably discuss security measures for your accounts. Yes, I said. I'll be there tomorrow morning. Of course. And Mrs. Whitford? We're flagging your account. No transactions can be processed without you physically present and showing identification. You're protected. I thanked her and hung up. The house was silent. The kind of silence that rings in your ears. Outside, a bird sang. The mailman drove by. Life continued like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I stood up slowly and walked to the mantel where Harold's photo sat. His steady eyes looked back at me from behind the glass. He was smiling. The smile of a man who believed in hard work and honest living. You tried to warn me, I whispered. Didn't you? That night, I didn't cry. Crying would come later. That night, I planned. Because if there's one thing life taught me, it's this. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. And when they try to take everything from you, make sure they leave with nothing. I went to bed early. Set my alarm for 6 a.m., laid out my best dress, and Harold's old watch. Tomorrow I would walk into that bank. And I would do something Martin would never expect from his quiet, trusting mother. I would fight back. The morning came gray and cold. I dressed slowly, buttoning each button on my navy dress with hands that were steadier than they'd been in days. Harold's watch went on my left wrist. The leather band was worn soft from years of his wearing it. It smelled faintly of his aftershave still, or maybe I just imagined it did. I looked at myself in the mirror. 76 years old. Silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. Lines around my eyes from a lifetime of smiling. Harold used to say I had kind eyes, but kindness, I'd learned, could be mistaken for weakness. Not today. I ate a small breakfast. Toast with butter. Black coffee. Then I picked up my purse, locked the front door, and walked the 6 blocks to Crestline Bank. The morning air bit at my cheeks. My shoes clicked against the sidewalk in a steady rhythm. When I pushed through the glass doors, Mrs. Delaney was already waiting. She stood up from her desk the moment she saw me, her expression a mixture of concern and respect. Mrs. Whitford. She extended her hand. Thank you for coming in. We walked to her office. The same office where, just yesterday over the phone, my world had cracked open. She closed the door behind us. Offered me tea. I declined. Let's get straight to it, I said, settling into the chair across from her desk. What are my options? Mrs. Delaney opened a folder. Inside were copies of the documents Martin had presented. I could see my name typed at the top. And at the bottom, a signature that looked almost right but wasn't. He'd practiced. That was the thing that hurt most. He'd practiced forging my signature. Legally, you could press charges, Mrs. Delaney said. This is fraud. Attempted theft. The police would take it seriously. But, she sighed, but he's your son, and prosecution is a long, painful process. It would become public. There would be court dates.
Testimony.
It would consume your life for months, maybe years. I nodded slowly. I'd already thought about this. Lying awake last night, staring at the ceiling, weighing my options. What else? I asked. You could simply secure your accounts. Change all access codes. Require dual authentication. Make it impossible for him to try again. That stops him from stealing, I said. But it doesn't stop him from trying. Mrs. Delaney leaned forward. What do you want to do, Mrs. Whitford? I looked down at Harold's watch. The second hand ticked forward. Steady. Relentless. Time moving whether we wanted it to or not. I want to make sure this never happens again, I said quietly. Not just to me. To anyone. I want to close every door he thinks he can walk through. If you believe protecting yourself isn't cruelty, it's wisdom, hit that like button. Sometimes the hardest decisions are the right ones. Mrs. Delaney studied me for a long moment. Then she pulled out a different folder. This one was thicker. There is another option, she said carefully. It's more permanent, but it's also more complicated. Tell me. You could establish an irrevocable trust. Transfer all your assets into it. Name a trustee, who is a Martin. The money would be completely protected, untouchable by anyone except who you designate. And Martin would have no access. No claim. Nothing. The weight of those words settled between us. This wasn't just changing passwords or adding security. This was severing the tie completely. Cutting him off not just now, but forever. Who would be the trustee? I asked. Anyone you trust completely. A lawyer, a financial advisor, or a family member. Sylvie's face flashed in my mind. Her daughters laughing in my kitchen. The way she'd cried at Harold's funeral, real tears, not the dry-eyed efficiency Martin had shown. My daughter, I said. Sylvie. Mrs. Delaney nodded. We'd need her to come in and sign paperwork. But yes, that would work. Everything would transfer to her management. She could oversee distributions to you for living expenses. And upon your passing, everything would go directly to her. Martin would be completely excluded. How long would this take? We could start the paperwork today. Have it finalized within a week. I sat back in the chair. Outside the office window, I could see other customers coming and going. An older man depositing a check. A young couple opening their first joint account, laughing about something. Life continuing in its ordinary way. But nothing about my life felt ordinary anymore. "There's one more thing I'd like to do," I said. Mrs. Delaney waited. "I'd like to write a letter. Have it notarized and stored here in the bank. So if anything happens to me, if Martin ever questions the trust or tries to contest it, there's a record. In my own words, explaining why." "We can arrange that." I opened my purse and pulled out the small notebook I always carried. The one where I kept grocery lists and phone numbers and little reminders to myself. I tore out a fresh page, and I began to write. The pen moved slowly at first, then faster. The words came like water breaking through a dam. When I finished, I folded the paper carefully and handed it to Mrs. Delaney. She read it once, then looked up at me with something like admiration in her eyes. "Are you absolutely certain?" she asked. I thought about Martin's cold eyes in my kitchen, his practiced signature on forged documents, the years of distance and manipulation disguised as concern. "Completely certain," I said. She placed the letter in an envelope,
Sealed it.
marked it with my name and the date. Then she slid a new document across the desk. The trust agreement. Pages and pages of legal language that all boiled down to one simple truth. I was taking back control. "Whenever you're ready," Mrs. Delaney said softly. I picked up the pen. The same pen I'd held in this office before. The one that felt too heavy with the weight of what it meant. But my hand didn't shake this time. I signed my name, Eleanor May Whitford, clear and certain. And with that signature, I erased my son from my future. The paperwork took 4 days to finalize. 4 days of lawyers reviewing documents, notaries witnessing signatures, and Sylvie driving up from Indiana with questions in her eyes. We met at the bank on a Thursday afternoon. Mrs. Delaney had arranged for a private meeting room. Sylvie sat across from me, her hands folded on the table, her face pale. "Mom," she said quietly, "what's going on?" I'd practiced this conversation in my head a dozen times. But sitting there, looking at my daughter's worried face, all my rehearsed words disappeared. "Martin tried to steal from me," I said simply. Her eyes went wide.
What?
I told her everything. The visit, the phone call from the bank, the forged signature. I watched her face go through stages: disbelief, horror, anger, and finally, a deep sadness that mirrored my own. "I can't believe he'd do that," she whispered. Then she stopped herself.
No.
"Actually, I can. I just didn't want to." "Neither did I." She reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers were warm.
Real.
"What do you need from me?" "I'm setting up a trust," I explained. "Everything I have goes into it. I want you to be the trustee, to manage it. And when I'm gone, it's yours." "Mom, I don't want your money." "I know. That's exactly why you're the one who should have it." Mrs. Delaney entered then with more documents. She explained the process to Sylvie, how the trust would work, what her responsibilities would be, how Martin would be permanently excluded. "Does he know yet?" Sylvie asked. "Not yet," I said. "He's going to be furious. Let him be furious." My voice came out harder than I intended.
He chose this.
Not me. Comment below if you've ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-preservation. It's never easy, but it's sometimes necessary. Sylvie signed the papers. So did I. Mrs. Delaney notarized everything. By the time we walked out of that bank, every cent Harold and I had saved over 50 years of marriage was protected, locked away where Martin's reaching hands could never touch it. We stood on the sidewalk outside. The afternoon sun was breaking through the clouds. Sylvie looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry it came to this," she said. "So am I." I hugged her tight. "But it's done now." She drove back to Indiana that evening. I went home to my quiet house and made myself dinner.
Chicken and rice.
Harold's favorite. As I ate alone at the kitchen table, I thought about the letter I'd written. The one sealed in the bank's safe. The one Martin would only see if he ever challenged the trust. It contained just one sentence. But it was enough. You tried to close my account, Mart. But you closed your future instead. I slept that night better than I had in years. But I knew the storm was coming. And sure enough, 7 days later, my phone rang. His voice was different.
Panicked.
The smooth confidence completely gone. Mom, what did you do? I was in the garden, pruning my roses. The afternoon was warm. Birds were singing. I'd been having a peaceful day until that moment. Hello, Martin. Don't hello, Martin me. What did you do to the accounts? I set down my pruning shears, took off my gardening gloves, walked slowly into the house where I could hear him better. I protected myself, I said calmly. Protected yourself? His voice rose. The bank says everything's been moved.
Locked.
They won't tell me anything. They say I'm not authorized. That's correct. You're not. I'm your son.
Yes.
You are. The son who forged my signature and tried to steal my life savings. Silence. Heavy and thick. Then, I don't know what they told you, but that's not what happened. I was trying to help you. They misunderstood. Martin. I cut him off. I saw the documents. I saw my signature. The one you practiced until you got it almost right. Almost. Mom, you're confused. You're old. Maybe you signed something and forgot. Don't. My voice turned to ice. Don't you dare tell me I'm confused. I know exactly what you did. His tone shifted then, from panic to anger.
Fine.
You want to play it this way? You're making a huge mistake. That money is family money. I have a right. You have no rights. Not anymore. We'll see about that. I'll get a lawyer. I'll contest this. You can't just cut me out. I already did. He was breathing hard on the other end of the line. I could picture him pacing, fists clenched, the way he used to look as a child when he didn't get his way. Why, he demanded. Why would you do this to your own son? The question hung there. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt the old maternal instinct rise up. The urge to comfort, to explain, to smooth things over. But then I remembered his cold eyes in my kitchen, his practiced forgery, the years of manipulation. Because you stopped being my son the moment you decided I was just a bank account, I said quietly. Share this video if you believe actions have consequences, even in family. You'll regret this. His voice was pure venom now. When you're old and alone and need someone, don't come crying to me. Martin, I'm already old, and I'd rather be alone than be robbed by my own child. You ungrateful. I hung up. My hand was shaking now, not from fear, from the release of years of tension, of finally saying what needed to be said. The phone rang again. I unplugged it from the wall. It rang again an hour later. I let it go to voicemail. He left 3 messages, each one angrier than the last. Threats about lawyers, about how I was mentally incompetent, about how he'd make sure everyone knew what a terrible mother I was. I deleted them all without listening to the end. That was the last time I ever heard my son's voice. Some people would say I was cruel, that I should have forgiven him, given him another chance. That's what mothers are supposed to do, right? But those people never had their own child look at them and see only dollar signs. The house was quiet that evening. I made tea, sat in Harold's chair, watched the sun set through the living room window, and for the first time in months, I felt something unexpected.
Peace.
Sylvie called 2 weeks later. Her voice was gentle but concerned. Mom, Martin contacted me. I was baking apple pie. Harold's mother's recipe. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and autumn. What did he say? He said you'd gone crazy, that you'd cut him out of everything, and I needed to talk sense into you. She paused. I told him to go to hell. Despite everything, I smiled. Sylvie Marie. Well, I did. Maybe not in those exact words, but close enough. Her voice softened. Mom, are you okay? Really okay? I'm better than I've been in years. Do you want to tell me what happened? The whole story. So I did. Every detail. From Martin's visit to the forged signature to the trust. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, I could hear her crying softly. Mom, I'm so sorry. Don't be. It's not your fault. I feel like I should have seen it. Should have warned you. I always knew Martin was selfish, but I never thought he'd actually. Neither did I. But we know now. There was a long pause. Then, the girls want to visit next month. For your birthday. Is that okay? My chest warmed. I'd love that. And Mom? I don't want your money. I never have. If you want to set up the trust differently, give it all to charity or something. Sylvie, stop. The trust stays as it is. You'll manage it while I'm alive and inherit it when I'm gone. Not because you want it, but because you're the only one who deserves it. She was quiet for a moment. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. After we hung up, I finished the pie and set it on the windowsill to cool. The afternoon sun streamed through the glass, warming the kitchen. I stood there for a while, just breathing.
Just being.
The house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt peaceful, like a weight had been lifted from the walls themselves. That weekend, Sylvie and her family came to visit. The girls ran through the house, shrieking with laughter. Robert fixed my leaky faucet without being asked. Sylvie and I sat on the porch with lemonade and watched the sunset. The house feels different, she said. It is different. Lighter, somehow. I nodded. When you remove poison from your life, even the air tastes sweeter. She reached over and squeezed my hand. We sat like that until the fireflies came out, blinking their small lights in the growing darkness. Like this video, if you believe sometimes the family you choose matters more than the family you're born into. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I walked to Harold's photo on the mantel, touched the glass gently. I did it, I whispered. I protected what we built. I'm okay now. In the dim light, his smile seemed to glow, like approval, like he'd been waiting for me to finally stand up for myself. I slept deeply that night. No nightmares. No anxiety. Just the simple, quiet rest of a woman who'd finally chosen herself. The next morning, something arrived in the mail that would close this chapter forever. The envelope was thick. Expensive paper. Martin's law firm's return address embossed in gold. I opened it at the kitchen table with my morning coffee. Inside were legal documents. A petition to contest the trust. Claims of undue influence. Allegations that I was mentally incompetent. That Sylvie had manipulated me. I read every page carefully. Then I set them down and laughed. Actually laughed. Because Martin had forgotten one crucial thing. I'd prepared for this exact scenario. I called Mrs. Delaney. He's contesting the trust. I figured he might. She didn't sound worried. Do you want to respond? I want you to send him my letter. The one in your safe. And I want you to include the bank's documentation of his attempted fraud. Every record. Every camera screenshot from the day he came in with forged documents. Done. And Mrs. Delaney? I want him to know this comes directly from me. Not from lawyers. Not from Sylvie. From me. I'll make that very clear. 2 weeks later, the petition was withdrawn. Martin's lawyer sent a brief letter stating his client was no longer pursuing the matter. No apology. No explanation. Just silence. Mrs. Delaney called me with the news. Your letter did it. Whatever you wrote, it ended this. I knew what I'd written. One sentence. Simple and final. But it was enough to remind Martin that his mother wasn't the weak, confused old woman he'd assumed. That every choice has a consequence. And some doors, once closed, can never be opened again. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story. Every week, we share real stories about justice, courage, and the power of standing up for yourself. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments and inspire others with your own experiences. That spring, I planted new roses in my garden. Pink ones, Harold's favorite. They bloomed beautifully by June, filling the air with sweetness. Sylvie visited often with the girls. We made cookies, told stories. I taught them how to garden and bake and save money wisely. Not because they'd inherit mine someday, but because those were lessons worth passing down. I still live in my small house in Burlingdale. Still walk the same streets. Still bank at Crestline, where Mrs. Delaney greets me with a smile and genuine warmth. People sometimes ask if I regret what I did, if I miss my son, if I wish things had ended differently. The truth? I miss the son I thought I had, the one who existed in my hopeful imagination. But that son was never real. The Real Martin showed me exactly who he was. And I finally believed him. I learned that love doesn't mean letting people hurt you. That forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. That protecting your peace isn't selfishness, it's survival. I learned that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the daughter who visits every month, the granddaughters who call just to say hi, the bank manager who protects you when your own child won't. And I learned that justice doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes the quietest revenge is simply choosing yourself. My name is Eleanor Whitford. I'm 76 years old, and I'm finally, truly, completely free. Harold's watch still ticks on my wrist, steady, relentless, reminding me that time moves forward, whether we're ready or not. And I'm ready now. For whatever comes next, I'm ready. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe and turn on notifications. We share powerful stories like this every week, stories about real people finding their strength, standing up for themselves, and choosing peace over chaos. Share your own story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Thank you for being part of this family. Until next time, remember, the loudest justice is sometimes written in silence and signed with grace.